Just gratitude. I'm Cory Booker. I'm the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and I began my relationship with Aspen years ago thanks to a remarkable man named Bill Budinger, who somehow convinced folks to let me become a Crown Fellow. And then people like the Lauders got me back for the Socrates, and I'm grateful to be here for this incredible, stimulating, remarkable, humbling weekend. I have to say that it took me a lot to think about big ideas at a time that I stand here at the midpoint in my election to mayor, where I finished 2 years on my first term. I was afraid always to leave the city, and it wasn't until the last 6 months that I allowed myself to get away because of the urgencies. Now, Newark is slowly changing its reputation that seems to have been sealed in the mindset of so many people in our nation as a city of crime and corruption. Our city now is the fastest growing city in the Northeast, and the only one other city in New Jersey, urban or suburban, that has had a larger jump in median income. And the residents of the city of Newark, even without me, are doing such remarkable things to show me their heroism. If I can think of one big idea, though, it's one that's been reaffirmed on this mountaintop that I continue to get from the heroes in my city that are remarkable in their ability to show what the truth of America is and the determination of the American spirit. And unfortunately, it's not as exciting, or should I say, not as inspiring. It's maybe more telling you a big idea that was born out of some pain. And the pain that I see far too often, and anybody who lives in cities, be they Philadelphia, be they Los Angeles, be they Chicago, is the pain that comes from fear and living in fear, fear of gunfire, fear of gun violence. In my city, we are now doing a great job of, again, shedding that reality with a 40% drop in shootings and a 40% drop in murders, but the reality is it still exists. And too many people in America, millions of people, live every single day with this reality of what it's like to know people who've been murdered, to fear for your children when they walk to school. My experiences in Newark have been sobering at times and incredibly painful. The first time I witnessed gunfire, what it does to your heart, what it does to your psyche, what it does to the children who often see it themselves. I don't know if anybody has stood over a body that's been shot up and seen what happens. The first time I actually held somebody as they died waiting in vain for an ambulance to come was a young boy, a teenager, who should have been an American hero, who should have been in chemistry class, who should have been a poet. I sat there in vain watching this boy bleed to death, and it shook me to my core. It's times like that I have to say that I belie what some of my friends tease me. They say I suffer from a terrible case of BO, and I tell you it's not necessarily my lack of using deodorant. I think more it's the bold optimism that I have in my heart. I'm a prisoner of hope and chained to optimism, and sometimes in moments like these I feel like I'm chained to that white whale going down, and I'm trying somewhere to find something to hold on to. In Newark, there are many, thank God, heroes to hold on to. People who humble me because they have found a way to keep hope at the center of their lives. They've found a way to have unyielding faith. One of these people for me is a person I mentioned in my talk earlier that I'm going back to see because she's about to turn another year older. She's into her 80s now. She just beat cancer. She's recovering, and we're going to have one hell of a celebration. She's a woman named Miss Virginia Jones, who probably will never be written about in any books, but she, to me, is the model of everything I aspire to be and dream to be in my life. After one of these times where I found myself in that pit, lasted about 12 hours, where I was sort of shaking my fist at the nation that I owe all of my life to, wondering about the hypocrisies that here we're talking about climate change, but it's been 30 years in the city of Newark that children have been suffering from asthma rates that are near epidemic, or elevated blood lead levels that lead directly to learning disabilities, whether you have lead paint poisoning or not. Frustrated, as I said earlier, that our world, our nation seems to be obsessed with the death of affluent white girls like Natalie Holloway or Jean Benet Ramsey, but can't name one black child that's been murdered in this country. Frustrated that we seem to have a willingness, almost an alacrity, to spend countless money on law enforcement and prisons, but we don't do anything to stop the stream of our citizens into those institutions or help them when they come back. It was this time that I felt, as Bill Clinton said, what all Americans probably feel at some time, a deep and abiding anger, passionate, starting to eat away at my hope and optimism, that I found myself slapped in the face in a metaphorical way by this woman, Miss Virginia Jones. You see, I lived for about 8 years in some high-rise housing projects in Newark, and she was the tenant president of those buildings until the day that she and I both left as the last people to exit. And it was on this one day that I was in this pit of despair that I walked out of my building and saw her, and all I had to do was see the back of her head to be shaken. Because immediately I remembered a story that I found out from her late in our relationship, which I was asked by Esquire magazine to write about myself, and I said, that's kind of absurd when the real American heroes are people you'll never write about. And I wrote an article about Miss Jones and interviewed her, and in her interview, she told me about her son, somebody we would all be proud of, who put on an American military uniform, went overseas and served his country proudly, with diligence and determination. He came back, as she told me in this story, and one day she got a knock on her door and opened the door, and there was a man there, or a woman there, I can't remember which, that was crying and could not speak, and just grabbed Miss Jones and dragged her into the 5th floor, down 5 flights of stairs, into the lobby, where she saw her son on his back with bullet holes in his chest, bleeding into that lobby floor. She said she fell to her knees and wailed with the agony and the pain that I can only imagine, losing a child in such a manner. And after she told me that story, how do you react? What do you say to somebody? And the stupid things came to my mind, and unfortunately my filter wasn't there, and I spoke them. And the first thing that came out of my mind was, Miss Jones, I know where you work, I know what you do. Why do you still live in brick towers? You see, she was one of the handful of people in these buildings that actually paid market rent, was not on any subsidy. She could have lived other places in the city or even outside of the city if she chose. And I asked her that question, why do you still live here? And Ms. Jones is a character, and if you meet her, she's as tough as nails, she's beautiful and handsome, rugged woman. And she stood there. She stands only about 5'3", but as she prepared to respond to me, suddenly she was elevated as a giant would be, and I looked up to her. And she stood there and she crossed her arms, and she's salty in the way she speaks, and sometimes she has a tendency to repeat herself, and she says, why do I still stay here in brick towers? And I said, yeah, why are you still here? She goes, why do I still live in 715? I said, yes. And she goes, well, why do I still live in apartment 5A? And I said, yeah, why? And she looked at me proudly and stuck out her chest, and she says, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. There's a spirit in this country that is so powerful, so powerful. The spirit of people who are willing not simply to talk about the problems, to discuss them, but are willing to live every day in pursuit of the dreams that do not yet exist in this country. Langston Hughes said it, America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. This country we celebrated a few days ago still has not been real for millions of Americans who still suffer with circumstances beyond their control. So today I got a blessing this weekend and numerous times before. I got to come up onto the mountaintop. And I stand here and I listen to such incredible, erudite people who are involved in this larger human struggle. I go back in time and I say this often and said it before, that there are people here that do realize that our nation is not a spectator sport. It's not a time when we sit on couches and eat lavishly from food and watch the TV and what's going on and keep track and keep score of who's up and who's down, cheer on our people, our heroes out there fighting for our values, but we don't get up, strap on the chin strap and be willing to get into that game. To me, this is the biggest idea of all. Because being here these last 3 or 4 days, to me, is important. Exchanging ideas, cross-pollinating, meeting people who are fighting on different fronts of this common effort. It is so important. It is so necessary, but it is not sufficient. We face perilous times. We face real challenges. And I can only try to draw strength not just from those who stand with me now, but those Americans who are willing to do the extraordinary things to ensure that I might be here now. This great conspiracy of history of people who could probably not even dream of my existence. People like Crispus Attucks, who bled during the Boston Massacre. People like Joshua Chamberlain that bled in the Great Civil War battle. People who stormed beaches of Normandy and bled that sand red. People who got on buses to do freedom rides or sit at lunch counters who bled that southern soil red. The question is, will we show that same level of courage? Or maybe better said, will we demonstrate the same kind of sacrifice necessary to meet the challenges before us? I stand here on a mountaintop, both literally and figuratively. It was King in his last speech of his life who talked about that mountaintop. He told his people, his community, not just black people, but the human family, he said, I have been to the mountaintop and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. We are on that mountaintop now, and these conversations have given me even a more crystal clear vision of what the promised land looks like. But now we must descend again unto the valley, where the people are, where our brothers and sisters are, laboring and struggling under the most heinous reality. One of my favorite authors, and I quote him often, I know Richard Beery, who's one of my modern day heroes from East New York, has heard me say this many times, but I often conclude by going to a man who lived in complicated times, who wrote about the pain and the agony, unapologetically putting raw before Americans the twisted hypocrisy and the challenges of race relations, of poverty, of agony. And one of those beautiful books in which he laid it bare, a book called The Fire Next Time, he ends the book with an inspiring call, almost discordant with the book itself. He says in these profound words, as I paraphrase now, he says, I know what I'm asking you is impossible, but in today's day and age, the impossible is the least we can demand. And one is, after all, emboldened by the spectacle of human history in general and Negro history in particular, for it testifies to nothing less than the perpetual achievement of the impossible. And if we, and by we I mean the truly conscious blacks and the truly conscious whites, if we come together like lovers and insist upon and create and demand the consciousness of us all, then we will change the world and end that Bible prophecy made real in the Negro spiritual. God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. I'm here to tell you that I believe at the core of my being that the fires in America will rage again, but they will not be the fires of hatred. They will not be the fires of pain and agony. They'll be the fires of hope, the fires of love, the fires of torch, the very torch of the American dream, the torch that's carried each successive generation from a nation born in perfect ideals, but savagely imperfect reality, has carried hope of each nation, inspired courage and sacrifice to help us get to this moment on this mountaintop. We talk about poverty in the globe, but the real poverty right now is a poverty of compassion, is a poverty of hope, is a poverty of love. Let us all choose to leave this hallowed space and be the light, not with our words. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, everywhere I go, I preach the gospel, but only sometimes do I use words. Let us go and be living torches to burn with the fire through our efforts, through our energy, through our passion, through our actions, through our consistency, discipline, and sacrifice. If we do that, we need not wait for the next generation. We will get to the promised land. Thank you and God bless you.